We mentioned with the state of North Carolina in that I am the person that got Aaron's Law introduced to our state legislature. That law will require public school systems in the state of North Carolina to teach body safety classes to students in grades K through 12. So child abuse prevention, that is my topic. That is what we're going to discuss again today. I appreciate our host, Minister Tammy Tuck, giving me the platform again this week to discuss protecting those that are most precious in our lives. Those are the children that we all care about. So we'll start today's broadcast, as we always do, with a prayer, and then we'll get started with the topic. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the listeners that are with us today. Lord, thank you for the people that we will touch by the things that we discuss. Lord, allow those people to be led to the resources that they need if they have been abused. As a child, as an adult, if they have been an abuser, Lord, please allow them to see that grace can be in effect for them as well, that anyone can come to you with anything that they have experienced, Lord, and receive forgiveness and receive direction and purpose in their life. We ask your blessing on the broadcast today, and we ask your blessing for those that are listening. Amen. Okay, we'll get started. Again, I thank Minister Tammy Tuck for allowing me the format to discuss this topic again. We know it's something that's difficult for most folks to deal with. It's difficult for most people to talk about. And unfortunately, that difficulty in discussing it is what allows it to continue to impact our society. So we're going to hash through it again today. A couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of being guest host for Minister Tammy, and we talked about the fact that the holidays are coming up. And with the holidays coming up, families are going to be together. And with families and friends and folks being together, we unfortunately have a situation in which children could be sexually abused. And a lot of people that may not be familiar with this topic are thinking, how could that happen? If I'm with family and friends, my children are safe. Unfortunately, we know that that's not always the case. We know that for over 90% of the cases in which child sexual abuse occurs, that abuser is someone that the family and the child know and trust. Otherwise, that person would not have access to that child in that capacity. So family time, holiday time, is a time that we need to be having this discussion. So we're going to talk today, among other things, about how you talk with your children. We focused a lot the last time I was on the show. We talked about what adults could do, what we should do as adults if a child discloses, what signs we should look for that might let us know that a child has been abused. But today we're going to spend a good deal of time talking about how we talk to our kids. Again, the Darkness to Light Stewards of Children training program teaches adults how to prevent, recognize, and react responsibly to child sexual abuse through what we call our 5 steps to protecting our children. What I'm going to talk about today in talking about it, which is step 3 in our training, we're going to talk about how to talk with your kids and how to talk with them about their bodies, about boundaries. And again, I'll give information throughout our broadcast today and at the end of our broadcast on how you, your community organization, your church, your school, your sporting organization, I'll give information about how you can sign up to take the Stewards of Children training to have in-depth training and discussion on the best ways that you can use to protect the children in your care. But when we talk about how we talk with children, we have to start talking when they're young. I often give an example of when children are being potty trained. That's the perfect time to start talking with them about private areas, about the areas that bathing suits cover and those being private areas, and how we are not to touch people in those areas, and how if someone were to try and touch a child in that area, we have to let children know it's okay to tell. If someone tells you, don't tell that we're doing this. That's almost like a secret code between a child and a trusted adult, that if someone says that to you, that really means you're supposed to let me know. You're supposed to let mom know, dad, auntie, whomever that trusted adult is. We have to let kids know, tell someone. So let's talk about that for a minute. Those young children and proper names for body parts are an important thing that we have to discuss. We can't do cutesy names. We can't give them names that aren't anatomically correct. We teach an arm as an arm. We teach a leg as a leg. We have to teach that all body parts have specific names. And that's done for a couple of reasons. In this situation of preventing child sexual abuse, the most important reason that we do that is so that if something does happen with the child, then that child is using the correct terminology if they have to disclose something. In our Stewards of Children Darkness to Light training, in one of the video segments, we experienced someone sharing an incident that they were aware of in which a preschool child, was in circle time with her preschool class. Her trusted preschool teacher was asking for volunteers in the class, and the child volunteered. And what the child told in that circle time was actually a sex act that had taken place, a predatory sex act that had taken place at the hands of her father. But because the child did not use the correct terminology for body parts, that child had gained the courage to tell. She told a trusted adult, but the teacher did not realize the information that she was receiving because proper body part names were not used. So it's really important. That's point number one. It's really important to use those proper names for body parts. And we going back to, of course, what we know the Bible instructs in terms of us protecting children and not doing harm to children. We're obligated as responsible adults who care about children. We're obligated to share this information with them and to train a child up in the way in which we would want them to go. And so we're held to some responsibility, even biblically, that we are to protect our children in this manner. The second point that I'd like to make in talking with our kids is using real-life conversation starters. Unfortunately, we see far too often on the news about incidences of child sexual abuse within our community. It may be something that occurred in a place of faith, of worship. It could be something that occurred at a school. So those are prime opportunities. We call those teachable moments in the world of education. Those are teachable moments in which we can introduce conversations with our children that open the door in the event that something has occurred with them, in the event that something might occur in the future. We've broken down that wall, that barrier that so many of us are familiar with because we don't talk about this topic in our society the way that we should. And again, that's what allows it to continue. So real-life conversation starters. You're watching the news with your child, one of these news stories comes on. You can pose questions and play the what-if game. What if one of your teachers tried to do that? What would you do? And you might find out some interesting answers to those questions. We kind of think as adults that we know what our children would do in those situations. Quite often, sometimes we might be surprised by their responses. We have to think about how child sexual abuse operates, or violence, domestic violence even, of that sort. It operates when one party, the predator, has control, power, or authority over the other party. And so just imagine if you were the recipient of unwanted sexual advances from someone within your place of worship, from someone on your job. As an adult, it would be a difficult thing for us to share. It would be a difficult thing for us to deal with. So now imagine a child who is the target of unwanted attention of a sexual nature, coach, from clergy. So we have to make certain that we discuss these things with our children and play the what-if game. What if another child wanted you to touch their private parts? What would you do? So those conversation starters will help us give us an opportunity to understand where our children might be in thinking about these things. And, again, it sets the format for discussions to take place in the event that something were to ever happen. Our next point is we have to tell children what sexual abuse is, and we can do that in an age-appropriate, non-scary way. Our friends over at Kid Power do a great job with this. Kid Power is a curriculum that is found and used in some schools and community organizations. Kid Power teaches kids how to stand up to bullying, how to be confident in their body, to prevent child sexual abuse. And again, we can do this on age-appropriate levels that aren't scary to kids, in ways that allow them to feel empowered, in ways that allow them to get the information that they need in order to hopefully prevent child sexual abuse. Our next point is we have to let children know that it is our job as adults to protect them from child sexual abuse. I want to stay there for just a moment because that is a really big message for children to hear. It's a really big message for children that have been sexually abused, because quite often the way that a predator works is they make the child feel that this situation is their fault. They brainwash the child. There's a lot of manipulation involved. There's a lot of mind games, for lack of a better way to put it, and so a child is almost set up to believe that it's their fault, and therefore, why would they tell? If they've been involved in something that they now may have realized is inappropriate, they have been given, it should not have been taken place this way, but the person has placed the blame or shame on the child. So it's difficult for a child to discuss this. So if we set the tone with children early on that if someone tries to do something like this to them, it is, number one, not the child's fault, and number two, it's our job as the adults in that child's life to protect them from child sexual abuse. So we've taken the burden and the responsibility off of that child. And again, this sets the tone for a child to have open communication with the adults in their world who are safe, with the adults who would protect them from something of this nature. We have to, moving on to the next point, number 5, we have to tell children what parts of the body others should not touch. We can do this by using examples with situations and people in their lives. We have to include that touching boundaries are for everyone. Everyone. That means family members, older youth that are a part of their lives, babysitters, cousins, friends, even parents. We have to explain that particular body parts are off limits for anyone in any of those groups that we just mentioned. So children have to understand, even going to the doctor should explain in the presence of mom or dad if a physical has to involve examining private body parts. So really important there. We have to let children know what body parts others should not touch. One way that we can foster this within our children is to demonstrate good touching boundaries ourselves. We can give high fives as a way to congratulate a child. We can give fist bumps. We can do the pinky shake, if you will, the pinky handshake. There are lots of things that we can do that allow us to demonstrate good boundaries ourselves with children. In education, we often encourage teachers to do those things, give a high five, give a fist bump. And certainly when we're talking about families, and again, thinking about the holidays approaching, when we're talking about families, we should not force little Johnny or little Susie to sit on Aunt Mary's lap or sit on Uncle Bob's lap. When we do that, when we force children to do something that they do not want to do, we are sort of breaking down that natural self-defense mechanism that we all have. We break that down when we don't allow them to listen to their bodies and know that it's okay to not want to sit on someone's lap. They can choose to give that person a high five or a handshake or a fist bump. So again, by demonstrating those good touching boundaries ourselves, we foster within our children what it is that we would wish for them to do. Along those same lines, our next point that we're going to discuss is about teaching children that they have the right to tell anyone no, to ward off unwanted touch or even an uncomfortable touch. We never should force children again to give affection. We should never, I'll say that again, we should never force children to give affection, because affection is something that's a two-way street. If they want to give grandma a hug, then certainly they should. But if they don't want to, they should not be forced to. One way that we can continue to foster healthy boundaries within our children is to explain what kind of touch is okay by an adult that is helping them. For example, we touched a little bit earlier on when you're visiting the doctor. And the doctor should always say, I'm about to touch you here. And again, we can let our children know that those kinds of exams are always going to be done with mom or dad or grandma or someone present with whom they feel comfortable. We should explain to them that the kind of touch that's okay for an adult to allow is helping them get dressed, those kinds of things. Another biggie, and this is something that I discussed in depth with some folks within our state here in North Carolina who work in the area of preventing not only child sexual abuse but sexual assault. I had the pleasure last week of attending the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Assault Prevention Summit in Raleigh, North Carolina. And one of our sessions that I attended was about preventing child sexual abuse within our communities of folks that have cognitive disabilities or developmental delays. And with my background being in working with children with special needs, I'm so excited to see the work that UNC Chapel Hill is doing, as well as other agencies in the community that focus specifically on how we can best protect this vulnerable part of our population. So with that in mind, we need to help children and young adults or adults who might have cognitive disabilities. We have to help them determine who trusted adults are within their school and other settings in the community. And you might be thinking, why do we have to do that? But we have to make the obvious completely obvious. For children who are used to seeing someone in the neighborhood who they might not have a relationship with other than saying hi as they walk to school each morning or waving at them, children are very trusting. They trust that adult. They think that person is their friend. And so we have to be very explicit as parents in determining for our children or helping them know who is really in their circle. And it can be as simple as conversations when you're riding in the car. It can be as simple as drawing a circle and placing that child in the middle and have that child then draw pictures or write names of people around them on that paper. Have them write pictures or draw pictures or write names of the people around them with whom they would trust telling if something inappropriate were to occur with them. On to our next thing. We have to let children know, and again, this is kind of tough for some parents because, again, we recognize this is a topic that most people don't discuss. Most people aren't comfortable discussing. So I'm hopeful that for the parents that are listening today or the aunts or uncles or grandparents, I'm hopeful that I'm giving you some tips that you can take back and start having in those conversations with children when you're on the way to soccer practice or when you're leaving dance rehearsal, that you can start having these conversations so that it becomes second nature. We have to let children know that it is not okay for others to use sexual words with them or to even act in a sexual way. A lot of times what we've learned from folks who do sexually assault and abuse children, we've learned that many times they will test the boundaries not just with children, but they'll test the boundaries with adults. You might have someone who tells jokes that are inappropriate for children to hear. They might do things such as tickling a child, and then the child is asking them to stop, and they continue. Those kinds of things sometimes are done by a predator to, again, not only desensitize the child, but they're done quite often to see how other adults in that setting will react. If other adults in that setting don't react, then that person knows I'm probably in an environment in which child sexual abuse prevention is not discussed. And I'm in an environment where I'm probably going to get away with doing this ill intent and harm that I have in mind towards the child. So we have to be on our P's and Q's, again, as responsible adults. We have to let children know inappropriate words, inappropriate gestures. Those things are just as important, and those are red flags for those of us that are wanting to protect children. On to our next point. We have to teach children to keep a distance from people who make them feel uncomfortable. We all know that feeling that we can get in the pit of our stomach when something's just not right. It's just that God-given ability to know when something is potentially harmful to us. As adults, we know that we can recognize that as the Holy Spirit that will speak to us at times and let us know when something is just not the way in which we may envision it. If we're questioning, we have that ability to know when something is not the way that it should be. And so children have that too. And it's an innate ability that they have. And unfortunately, again, sometimes we desensitize kids. Sometimes we don't allow children to use that ability and gain confidence and strength in it. So if a child has that sense that they don't want to be around someone, that's a red flag for us as adults. We need to encourage that child to not have to be around that person that they're feeling uncomfortable with. So that's a really important thing. We have to reinforce and help children understand that it's okay to have that feeling, and that feeling is a gift because it's going to prevent them from being harmed. We also have to let children know if they have questions about someone's behavior, the very best thing they can do is ask you, that trusted adult, about it. Again, we know that predators who have come to some point of rehabilitation and work with authorities in this field, they've shared information that most of us probably would never know otherwise. They will do things, again, that are inappropriate but don't really cross the line, just to gauge how that child and the adults in that environment are going to react. It kind of lets them know whether they can proceed with the ill-intended plans that they have to harm a child. So, again, we need to let our children know if they have questions about someone's behavior, ask mom, ask dad, ask grandma, ask uncle, whomever, so that they can get accurate information. Here, the next one's pretty big. I don't have secrets. We don't have secrets in our house. That's a word that we don't use. Most of us that are working to educate and prevent child sexual abuse, we will share with you, we don't have secrets. Secrets can be harmful. If someone asks a child to keep a secret, it's almost like a code with me and my daughters. If someone tells you to keep a secret, and I taught them this early on, it's really a code word for tell mama right away. Tell someone right away in the family, one of those identified people that we have established are people that you can trust. If I'm not around, you tell one of them. Here's the reason we practice that. Secrets, again, are harmful. Secrets can be hurtful. I prefer, and those of us in abuse prevention prefer to use the word surprise. Surprise has a positive connotation. We're going to have a surprise birthday party for someone. We're planning the events. They don't know about it. But in a couple of weeks, there'll be a celebration. Everyone's going to be happy. It's an enjoyable time. So think about that. Small things like changing the vocabulary that we use. Instead of using the word secret, use the word surprise. And again, teach your children. If someone asks you to keep a secret, you immediately must tell a trusted adult about whatever it is that you've been asked to keep secret. In this digital age that we live in, let's talk about this for a moment. When we are wanting to protect our kids from child sexual abuse, we not only have to be concerned with the environment, with the neighborhood, the community that we're in, the faith-based organization, the sporting organizations. Unfortunately, we have to be concerned in this day and age about protecting our kids from cyber predators. We have to explicitly let children know they are not to give out email addresses. They are not to give out actual home addresses. They're not to give out phone numbers or any other personal information while they're using the internet or any other handheld device. And I know this occurred with my daughter, my 10-year-old daughter. She was online and she was on a website that I had approved that she could be on, but an ad popped up. The ad was promising that she was going to win a brand new iPod. And it looked very real to her, being 10 years old. She was quite certain that if she completed the information that was being requested, she would, in fact, win an iPod. And it was a teachable moment for me to explain to her that ads like that pop up all the time. Most often, if you enter your data and give them the information, you could be downloading some kind of virus on your electronic device. And so it was a teachable moment for me to explain and once again reiterate that we never give out information, phone numbers, email addresses, home addresses, no personal information should be given while using the internet or any other handheld device. And along those lines, it's really important that we are monitoring our children's online usage. A lot of parents are of the mindset that it is an invasion of their privacy, and I kind of like the school of thought, if I bought it, if it's in my house and you're underage, yes, I'm going to monitor it, just as I monitor who you're with on a day-to-day basis in person, in real life. I need to know who the parents are of any child that you're wanting to spend time with. And so we need to, just as we monitor and know where our children are physically and who they spend time with physically, we also need to monitor and know about the sites that they're visiting while they're online, the services that they're using while they're online. I just saw a story on the morning news yesterday about a mom whose 12-year-old daughter was online thinking that she was chatting and emailing and texting and messaging a friend, and in fact, it wasn't a 13-year-old friend, as she thought. When her mom happened to look at the spyware that she had installed on her child's phone, she noticed that these messages just seemed a little different, and with further investigation, this mom found out that it was indeed a man that was in his 20s that had been messaging her child under the pretense of being an age-appropriate peer. So we really do, and this day and age is very different than when many of us were growing up. We really do have to monitor the sites that our children visit, their online experiences, who they're corresponding with online, what they're discussing while they're online. And sometimes just our children having the awareness that mom or dad or whomever is monitoring their usage, it will avoid situations in which they can be drawn into something that has no good intent for them. We have to tell children to trust those gut feelings. Those gut feelings, again, are so important because we have to allow children to foster and grow that skill that they've been given to intrinsically just know when something is not right. A lot of children who were sexually assaulted at a young age will speak of that as they've gotten older and disclosed, and even in adulthood are still dealing with it. They will speak of the fact that they didn't know exactly what was going on if the abuse started when they were at a very young age. They did not have words for the things that were happening, but their body's response let them know this is not something that is a good thing for me. And so we have to continue to foster and grow and nurture that feeling that children have of knowing when something is not right. Another great thing that we should do is review safety and touching boundaries anytime a child is in a new situation. If a child is going to a new daycare, if they've started participating on a new sports team, if they are going to a new after-school camp or a new church faith-based event with their peers, that's a great time for us to review boundaries because it's a new situation. And again, it keeps that conversation going. It's not a conversation that we have one time and we're finished. This conversation should take place again, starting when children are being potty trained, all the way up through young adulthood. It's just necessary for those responsible, concerned folks in that child's life to have the communication open so that a child is available or feels as though they have an available resource to go to if something is bothering them or if someone has done something that's inappropriate. Another point that I'd like to make is it's so vitally important that a child feels safe and loved in all of these discussions. We have to speak and listen calmly. If by chance a child discloses something during these kinds of conversations, we have to know how we should react so that we, number one, let a child know this is a safe place to share this. This is a safe place that you are able to give this information, and I will do something to help you. And we'll talk about that for a moment. The first things that we should do, if a child were to disclose to us, is to let them know that what happened is not your fault. You can support the child in a calm way by saying, you've shown a lot of courage by telling. You can say, I believe you. I will get the support that we need to get through this. So those calm, sort of confidence-building statements that we can make to a child will allow them to know that, yes, this is a place that I can share this information. It's going to be received, and this person is going to do something to help me. We advise folks to not make promises, though, because sometimes those promises can't be kept. So it is best, again, just to reinforce the child by saying very factual, truthful, encouraging things. What happened is not your fault. I believe you. You've shown a lot of courage by telling. Those kinds of things are very supportive to a child. And we can't ask leading questions if a child were to disclose to us. We can't ask those leading questions. We can just ask questions like, and what happened next? And what happened after that? And what did you do when that happened? And so those kinds of things are questions that we can ask that, again, are supportive of a child. We're not leading a child into giving us an answer that they think we want to hear. We're simply asking the child to share with us what happened. And those are important things, again, should you ever need to report to the authorities what has taken place based on a child's disclosure to you. I really urge people to take our Darkness to Light Stories of Children training. It's a great 2-hour training. In those 2 hours, adults will learn the 5 steps to protecting our children in order to prevent child sexual abuse. And this training is wonderful because it's not only available to any adult that serves in any capacity in working with children. You not only get this valuable information, you get a training manual. You also get 2 continuing education units if you are in a licensed profession, such as a teacher, even a cosmetologist, anyone in any licensed profession, a nurse can get the 2 hours of continuing ed credits when you have taken this training. And it's so important as adults that we are equipped with this information because, quite honestly, many of us don't know what to do. We don't have a clue as to what signs to look for if a child is being abused. We don't know what to do if a child discloses to us. We don't know how to foster an environment in which these conversations can take place. We don't know how to set that tone for open conversations with children about their bodies and about boundaries. And so it's really important that we are engaged in this kind of training so that we can better protect our children. And along those lines, when we talk about better protecting our children, sometimes we might be in a situation that we refer to as a bystander situation. We talked a little bit about this the last time Minister Tammy had me on the show, but I'm going to go a little bit more in depth in it today. Bystander intervention. A bystander is a person who witnesses a boundary violation or sees a situation in which a child is vulnerable. And the important thing that I like to stress to people is when you're intervening, when you're a bystander and you intervene, it's not important that you know the intentions of the person who crossed the boundary. What's most important is that you reinforce the boundary. It's perfectly okay if your intervention happens in front of other people. In fact, setting limits in front of other people creates a new norm for that environment. And it says to anyone, we enforce boundaries here. It also sends a message to children that you know what the boundary is and that you will protect them. So that's a really important thing that we stress in our training is bystander intervention. You have to always make sure anyone who you see violate a boundary is willing to follow the limit that you set. If not, then that's a flag to you that you need to remove that child to a safer situation. And that means that you need to have a discussion with that person who has chosen to violate the boundaries that have been established within that organization or within that school or sporting group, whatever the case may be. And that's just one way that we as adults can set those boundaries and help make environments safer for children. I talked a little bit earlier about the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Assault and the Prevention Summit that I attended last week, in which we were looking at ways in how we broaden our lens and shift the culture within our community. We all have heard about the horrific stories that have come out of all different kinds of situations within the faith-based community, all different kinds of situations within the educational community, within sporting organizations. I think about Penn State and the things that occurred there. It really is a responsibility that we all share in shifting how we deal with sexual abuse within our culture. Minister Tammy and I have talked about this numerous times, about how fortunate we feel that we are within Guilford County and Greensboro, that we have faith-based communities that are actively involved in preventing child sexual abuse. And in order for things to change within our society, it's my belief that churches are going to have to become involved in dealing with this, because we have churches, in any given church, there are church members who are suffering, that have been abused. In all likelihood, we have church members that are suffering that have been the abuser themselves. And so churches can really, really lead the charge to make change within our community. I know that within the month of April, our church in Greensboro, Love Fellowship Believers, is one of those churches that I am proudly able to say leads the way in the community in terms of drawing attention to the issue of child sexual abuse and what we can do to prevent it. The church has stood behind my efforts to lead the Million March Against Child Abuse, and our church, quite frankly, prayed Aaron's Law into passage in the North Carolina State Legislature, if you ask me. And churches have to take the charge. April will be rolling around soon before we know it. I know it's cold in the southeast now, and we're bracing for winter. But during the month of April, I would urge every listener to encourage your church to become involved in preventing child abuse. And again, the month of April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, but it's not too early to start planning what your church can do to get involved, to help lead the initiative in the community. Pray for the children across our nation that are being abused. Connect with the local child advocacy centers, which are in communities to help children that have disclosed abuse. Contact those child advocacy centers and see how your church can become involved through volunteer efforts, to supplying maybe some of the things that the child advocacy centers need, because they're on the front lines, and they certainly need the support of the community, of those of us that are believers, to pray for the children that they serve, to pray for the people that work in those capacities, to pray for our nation to change in terms of the way we respond to adults and children who have been sexually assaulted. So there's so much that we can do within the faith community to help protect those that God has instructed us to protect in the strongest ways possible. We'll talk more about that in the coming months, and we'll talk more about what Blue Sunday is. On the fourth Sunday of the month of April, Blue Sunday is when churches around the country do special services to recognize the fact that child abuse exists in our communities and what we can do, again, to help eradicate this very preventable calamity that occurs within our communities. And so we'll talk more in the coming months about that, but I just wanted to put that on everyone's radar as we move forward. Remember the month of April, and we'll be doing more as we get closer to Child Abuse Prevention Month. We'll share ways in which faith communities can come together to support the works of those that work to prevent our kids from being harmed, and those folks that work in response to when a child has been sexually assaulted. And so with that in mind, we're going to move on and talk a little bit about some of those folks, again, that are at the greatest risk within our communities. A lot of churches will do special services for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and they do wonderful things in our communities through different organizations. One thing that we have found that is missing or was missing within this conversation about meeting the needs of folks with developmental disabilities is we recognized that there was a gap in this most vulnerable population that actually is over 3 times more at risk for child sexual abuse than their non-disabled peers. And so we think about God's children, all of us, those that are not impacted by a physical or cognitive disability, those that might be impacted. When we think about all of these children and even adults, it is our responsibility. It is our responsibility to equip them with the information they need and to equip ourselves with what we need in order to best protect them. So I mentioned earlier the University of UNC has a great program here in North Carolina. UNC Chapel Hill has a program in which they work within a family and with those individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. And based on a special curriculum that's been developed, those individuals are taught the very things that we're discussing today. And so anyone that would want more information about that, or if you know of someone that might be a good match for that program, I will certainly share that information at the end of our broadcast today. Because it's a great program. I was very excited to learn about the work that they're doing at UNC Chapel Hill. Just wonderful things, again, to speak out in support of folks that have disabilities that are at a greater risk than even the folks in our communities that are not at a greater risk because of their developmental stages. But we know that this training is only the beginning. Any of the trainings that we've discussed today, any of the abuse prevention efforts that we've talked about, training is only the beginning because child sexual abuse is a very, very complex problem. We certainly understand that if a child has been abused, these trainings and the things we're discussing now are not therapeutic tools. We know that people that are listening today may need more than the discussion that we're having on air today about it. So I want to share with people some resources, some national resources that they can utilize if you are in need of them, if you know someone that's in need of them. There are organizations that are out there that have hotlines that are manned 24 hours a day. And so we want to spend a little bit of time talking about that now, just for those folks that may need some services. If you feel that, well, let me back up. I want to back up a little bit. First of all, we know that child sexual abuse is something that is very prevalent in our communities. And for anyone that's heard me on the show before, you've heard me give the example of survivors within our country filling 46 national football stadiums. So just think about that image for a moment. 46 national football stadiums could be filled with the survivors in our country, the survivors of child sexual abuse. So when we think we don't know anyone that's been abused, unfortunately we have. When we think we don't know anyone that's been an abuser, unfortunately we do. And so one way that we can help people that might be needing this information is to steer them to a child advocacy center. And child advocacy centers are the place that a child can go, a child in that family can go, that they can receive the help that they need. They might have to have a physical exam. They might have to have psychological evaluation and treatment. And the child advocacy centers across our nation are the one place where all of this can be done without a family and a child having to go to several different agencies to take care of reporting and getting treatment for abuse. The benefits of a child advocacy center are numerous, and I'm just going to go over a few of them so that people are aware of what a great resource they provide in our communities. Child advocacy centers are, first and foremost, very child-friendly. The environment is safe. It is very welcoming to a child. It's very child-friendly. The wonderful folks who work at the child advocacy centers across our country, they are professionals who understand the needs of a child who has experienced trauma. So this is what they do on a daily basis. They're skilled and just some of the best folks in the world in terms of helping a family and a child heal from abuse. At a child advocacy center, the number of interviews that a child has to go through is greatly reduced. Greatly reduced. Again, this is the one place that a family can go to, and all of the service providers that they need in order to help their child start on the road to healing are housed in this one agency. Forensic interviews, those are legally sound, they are neutral, and they are focused on finding fact if you are at a child advocacy center. That's an important thing because obviously if a child's been sexually abused, then someone who committed that crime needs to be held accountable. And so oftentimes, if a child is not taken to a child advocacy center once the abuse report has been made to the authorities, then the investigation may not go the way that it should. And so forensic interviews that are taking place at or legally sound, rather, because they've taken place at a children's advocacy center, that information can be entered into a court of law. Another great benefit of a child advocacy center is decisions are made by a team of professionals. Families, again, feel supported because the experts that they need on their side to help them with their child and go on the road to healing and get in a place where they feel safe, child advocacy centers, again, fulfill this need. There's specialized medical evaluations that can take place at a child advocacy center, and as well as a very important piece of the puzzle, which is treatment. If a child has been sexually assaulted, it is of the utmost importance that they are treated, and not just treated by anyone, but they need to seek a therapy and counseling with someone who has experience, who is skilled at working with children that have experienced this kind of trauma. And so if someone that's listening today knows a child that's been sexually assaulted and maybe it's not been reported to the authorities yet, I would urge you to do that. Report it to the authorities and then request that a child advocacy center be used for all of the follow-up physical exams, psychological exams, treatment, the forensic interviews. Request that a child advocacy center be utilized once that report has been made to the authorities. If you need help finding a child advocacy center near you, you can call the National Children's Alliance, and they can be reached at 1-800-239-9950. Again, that's 1-800-239-9950. Or if you prefer, you can go online to their website, which is www.nationalchildren'salliance.org. And again, you can easily find a child advocacy center. Maybe you don't know a child that's been abused and that needs this resource. But again, don't even wait until April for your faith-based organization, for your church to come together and see how you can support this organization that does such a great service in our communities around the country. The holidays are coming up. Maybe your church can do something to help those children that unfortunately, despite it being the holidays and celebratory times for us, there will be children that are visiting a child advocacy center as a result of the abuse that they've endured. And so anything that your church can do to help that family and that child that might seek guidance at a child advocacy center would be great. So please keep child advocacy centers in your gift giving, in your volunteer, within those realms. Keep them in mind as we approach the holidays because they certainly could use and appreciate your support. I want to give out some more information in terms of resources today. If you are aware of any kind of child pornography, which we really didn't talk about that earlier when we were discussing Internet safety and Internet crimes, if you are aware of any kind of child pornography, you can report it to your local police, or you can report it to the cyber tip line at 1-800-THE-LOST. That's 1-800-THE-LOST. Or you can go online and report it at www.missingkids.com. And both of those can be utilized 24 hours a day. The cyber tip line is operated by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and that organization works with police across the nation to help end child sexual abuse. So again, child pornography in and of itself is child sexual abuse, because the images that are in those videos, in those movies, are actual recordings of children being abused. And so again, if you're aware of any child pornography, please reach out to the cyber tip line at 1-800-THE-LOST. Or again, you can go online to www.missingkids.com. And again, those can be accessed 24 hours a day. And I wanted to stop there for a moment. The Lord just kind of laid it on my heart to sit there for a second and just talk about how responsibility, the word responsibility just keeps getting dropped in my spirit, responsibility. And we know that the Lord charges us to not do harm to the smallest ones, the children. The Lord charges us to train a child up in the way in which they should go. And so if we certainly can see how biblically we are held responsible to keep our children safe. We're held responsible to teach them, to give them knowledge. And sometimes that knowledge is going to start with us gaining knowledge ourselves first before we can help them reach a level of knowledge about a particular topic. And I know just personally for myself, this is a mission that the Lord has me on, to share this message with churches, with community organizations, with schools, with sporting organizations. And in the work that I have done, it is very humbling to have people come up to me when I've done community events at churches or just at other places in the community, and to have people say, I want to pray for you because I know that this is something that's impacted me, and I thank God that He is now using people like yourself to shed light on this and to start this discussion within our communities, within our churches. So there are things that, again, churches can do. There's so much that churches can do to carry out what the Bible instructs us to do in terms of protecting children and safeguarding our children. And so, again, we know that, I guess that was brought up in my spirit when we were there around the issue of child pornography, because we know that pornography is a huge issue in our country. We know that it's something that churches are even beginning to deal with now, thankfully. Churches are beginning to deal with their church members who may have an addiction. And so if you know of someone who has child pornography, if you know of someone who may be instrumental in creating child pornography, it is of the utmost importance that you report it to the police, because at the end of the day, again, the Lord is holding us responsible with the information that we have, the information that we're sharing. When we know better, we have to do better. We have to do better, and we have to do better, especially by those youngest, most vulnerable members of our society, and that's our children. Other resources that I'd like to share today with those that might be listening. We certainly know that among us there are people that are sexual abusers. And if you're listening today and you are one of those folks that has had inappropriate contact with children, there is a group called the Association for the Treatment of Sexual Offenders. You could go online to this website and you could request a referral for local folks within your community that could help you move past this point of sexually abusing children. The children suffer. It has lifelong impact. Those that have been sexually abused are at greater risk for promiscuity. Those that are sexually abused are at greater risk for mental health issues. they're at greater risk for suicide, for substance abuse issues. So it has lifelong impact. And again, if you are someone that's listening to today's broadcast and you know that you've had inappropriate contact with a child, there are people out there that can help you. Again, the organization is called the Association for the Treatment of Sexual Offenders. And to request a referral, you would go online to www.atsa.com/request-referral. And you could certainly get on the road to healing so that no other children are harmed. No other children are harmed under your care. To help anyone who may have been sexually abused and who needs support, it's never too late to get help. It's never too late for you to learn that it's not your fault. It's never too late for you to learn ways that you can overcome the abuse that you may have suffered as a child. It's just of the utmost importance for anyone that has been sexually abused to know that it is not their fault. It is not their fault. You can get help. You can overcome. And you can move to a place where the sexual abuse that you may have encountered as a child no longer controls your life. And so within communities across the country, there are different organizations that you can reach out to. Within most communities, there is within most communities, there is a sexual assault organization, a sexual assault prevention organization. As an adult, you could certainly seek their services. If there's abuse that has occurred in your past that's never been reported, go to the police and report it. It can be handled. It can be taken care of. Sometimes people think it's been so long, there's no need for me to deal with it. If going to the law enforcement authorities is not your first line of thought of what you'd like to do, you can certainly seek a counselor, a therapist, who will help you work through everything that you've experienced and get you on a path to healing within your community. There are people that are skilled, expert in doing this. And so, pardon me again, I would urge anyone that has been sexually assaulted as a child, it is never too late. It is never too late to get help. Never too late. If, for some reason, you find that a child has been sexually assaulted and the legal system does not provide adequate protection for a child, then what you could do is visit the National Center for Victims of Crime, and that website is www.ncvc.org, or you can call 202-467-8700 for referral information to connect you with people in your local community. And again, if a child discloses to you and you are that trusted adult that they feel safe sharing this information with, then you would certainly call your local law enforcement authorities and report the abuse that the child has just disclosed with you. It will take a lot of effort on all of our parts to prevent child sexual abuse, but we have to do something. We have to be proactive instead of reactive. We have to be aware of those things that we can do within our environment to establish safe boundaries. We have to know what to do if a boundary's been violated. We have to know what to do to start this discussion with our children in order to better safeguard them. We have to know what to do if a child discloses to us. When child sexual abuse ends, we'll see so much less of so many things that impact our society. And in doing the work of preventing child sexual abuse, we're standing toe-to-toe with the enemy, face-to-face, letting the enemy know that he will not have control over our children. He will not plant seeds in those children early in life that they still struggle with, that cause strongholds within their life as adults. So I see this as I'm in a battle. I'm in a battle, but I'm on the winning side. And I encourage you to join me in the efforts to prevent child sexual abuse, because as child sexual abuse ends, we'll see less violence, we'll see less post-traumatic stress, we'll see less substance abuse, we'll see less homelessness, we'll see less violence, we'll see less teen pregnancy, school dropout, less illness. We'll see all of those things. And in return, what we will see is generations of healthier, happier, God-fearing children. And that is what I charge each of us to do. Do something so that we, on Judgment Day, can say that we did our part to help protect those that are so vulnerable within our society. So again, I have enjoyed being the guest host today for Minister Tammy. This is Sonia McTillman. Always, 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 always happy to share a word about preventing child sexual abuse with our listeners. If something I mentioned today is something that you need more information on, please know that you can reach me several different ways. I can be reached by email at macgreensboro@gmail.com. That's M as in Mary, A as in Apple, C as in cat, A as in Apple, Greensboro, GREENSBORO @gmail.com. I can be reached by phone at area code 704-606-3753, and I can be reached on Facebook at Million March Against Child Abuse, Greensboro. That's Million March Against Child Abuse, Greensboro. So please, if there's more information that any one of our listeners is needing in the area of preventing child sexual abuse, or if you need to know more about how your church can get involved in the prevention efforts that are taking place across the country, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to connect you with people in your local community that are leading this fight every day. And in your prayers, please keep those children that have been sexually abused on your heart. And for the folks that work in child abuse prevention, please keep them in your heart and in your prayers as well as they move forward to try and end this very preventable tragedy that takes place in our country each and every day. It is time for us to come to an end for today's show. Again, I thank you for listening. If you need to reach out to me, please do so. Again, Sonia McTillman, Darkness to Light, Stewards of Children Prevention Educator. Please give me a call, send me an email, let me know what I can do to help you or your church stand shoulder to shoulder with us in this fight to prevent child sexual abuse. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we're going to close out with a prayer, and that will close out our show. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the connections that have been made through the broadcast today, Lord. We thank you for those folks that were listening and that got a word that will help them move forward in keeping the children safe in their lives, Lord. We ask you to lay it on our hearts of anything that we can do more of to prevent child sexual abuse within our communities. And, Lord, we ask you just to continue to bless those efforts that we're working in, Lord. Please, Lord, put a special hedge of protection around any child that is being sexually abused, Lord, and let them know that despite what has happened to them, it is not them. And please, Lord, let their eyes, ears, and hearts know that it is not too late for them to come to you, that you are a place of healing for them, for anyone who has been abused, Lord, any kind of abuse. We ask that you start that path to healing and let the people know that you are the way in which healing can take place, Father. We thank you for this time today, Lord, and we look forward to being able to share this word of prevention in the future. Amen. Thank you again to all of our listeners today. We appreciate you, as usual, for tuning in. Minister Tammy will be back with you next week, but in signing off, thank you so much, Minister Tammy. Sonia McTillman, guest host today for Grace Talk. Have a good day, everyone. Be blessed. Good afternoon, everyone. We are I teach adults how to better safeguard environments to protect children from child sexual abuse. I also work in abuse prevention with the state of North Carolina in that I am the person that got Aaron's Law introduced to our state legislature. That law will require public school systems in the state of North Carolina to teach body safety classes to students in grades K through 12. So